Hello, good morning or good afternoon to all of you out in the audience, depending on where you're at in the world. Thank you for joining us today for the 10th episode of Screens Unscripted, and this is our final episode of season 1, so we are very pleased to see everyone today. This series of Fireside Chats is meant as an opportunity to explore innovations and trends in digital signage and display technology with industry subject matter experts. And as always, I continue to see familiar names in the audience. Boy, some of you are gluttons for punishment. So for those of you returning, welcome back. It's great to see everybody again. But for those of you new to the series, let me do a real quick intro. First, myself. My name is Jonathan Braun. I'll be your host today. I'm the principal of Braun Consulting, director of the Digital Signage Experts Group, and I am a member of the board of directors of the Digital Signage Federation. So, of course, before we go any further, I have to thank our sponsor, Sony. Without them, we could not do this. They are a proud advisory council member to the Digital Signage Federation and a strong supporter of the industry. So really appreciate their support as always. Now, one last thing before I ask our guest to introduce himself, because I'm really looking forward to that. I know you're all here to actually hear from him, not me. But I want to do a bit of housekeeping for the audience, for all of you here. Everyone's on mute. You probably noticed that from the welcome announcement. Please use the chat or Q&A boxes on the right-hand side of your screen in GoToWebinar, unless you moved it. Then you're on your own. I have no idea where you put it. You'll have to figure that out. But go ahead and use those to communicate with us. I'll be more than happy to facilitate those questions to our esteemed guest for you. A recording of this session, since we get that question all the time, will be offered after we finish. So don't worry if any of your coworkers were not able to make it or you want to share this, no problem. You'll get a link from GoToWebinar with an opportunity to view the video. But again, thanks to our sponsor, Sony, they're going to be hosting this on their YouTube channel as well. That's going to be really helpful. That's also where you can go review all of the previous episodes in this season. Also, this is a continuing series of discussions with industry luminaries like our guest today. So please stay tuned for future episodes. This episode does conclude season 1, but we are currently gearing up for season 2, which we're excited about. If you have any topic suggestions, please share them with me. If there's somebody you'd like to hear from or there's a specific topic you have in mind to be useful, let us know and we will be happy to see if we can incorporate that into a future episode. Okay, to what we're actually here for. You're all tired of listening to me prattle on. We have a very special guest with us today from Skykit. And as always, I'm looking forward to the conversation, especially as I do when we have one of our key strategic CMS partners join us. Our topic today is harnessing scalable, secure, and data-driven digital signage. Lots of buzzwords. This is gonna be fun. For enterprise, not a bad topic to end season 1 with. So without further ado, I'd like to thank our special guest for joining us and give him a chance to introduce himself. Paul, thank you for being here. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about Skykit for those of us who aren't familiar with you.
All right, well, thanks, Jonathan. I am Paul Lundberg, CTO and co-founder of Skykit. Just for some background, Skykit launched in 2016, and we actually came out of a services consulting company, spun out of that in 2020. So our product kind of started within another organization. 2020, we spun out and became really dedicated to this whole mission. And you know, our background was really around cloud computing, building infrastructure, building applications in cloud, and we were doing a lot of work on IoT kind of projects. So we got really excited about how those topics kind of interleaved in terms of digital signage and kiosks, and felt like we had the right background to kind of build an innovative platform. We saw there were a lot of old tech out there in the world back at that time, and so we saw an opportunity. We actually started our relationship based, or our work on this product based on our relationship with Google and kind of being a partner on Google Cloud, doing work with Chrome devices. So that's where we got our start. It's really evolved a lot since then, which, you know, we'll talk about a lot about, I think, today, as we talk about like the direction we have taken and what we're doing today. It's evolved. I spend most of my time working on our product vision, our product strategy, spend a lot of time with our larger customers that are running large networks and just trying to knock down the next problem when it comes to scale or efficiency, reliability, security. Those are the big topics for me just about every single day. And I find that if I work on those kind of customers and those kind of networks, that it kind of trickles down to all the customers that we have, whether they have 5 screens or 30,000 screens. All of what we do, like to attack that issue of scale, really helps with in all aspects as we look at all our customers. So
outstanding. I
when
really
I'm
appreciate
not
it.
when I'm not working, I'm avid mountain biker. I spend a lot of
Ooh.
time doing cross country mountain bike racing and riding, and I live in Minnesota, so I play hockey. I watch a lot of hockey, so that's work, hockey, and mountain biking make up about 80% of my life.
Oh, that's awesome. See, that's exercise though. So clearly I don't really get much of that. So unfortunately, I don't relate, but you know what? I'll consider that my workout listening to you describe that for the day. So I appreciate it. And that's outstanding. I really appreciate you sharing that. I guess that's part of why the team has kind of such a focus around the Google platform, because that's kind of your primary way you operate as a CMS, right? Is around Android. At least that's how I was originally introduced to you. So it kind of makes sense with the Google background, right?
Yeah, and back before Skykit, we were working in both Google Chrome and Android. Just depending. A lot of the IoT projects we're doing were based more on Android. And so for us, maybe just to get into a little bit, when we built a CMS. So it was, just think of it, application layer. We were there. We were basically a web code base. We could run on a lot of different platforms, but we really focused in on Chrome, and we were very dependent on their devices.
Okay.
We had only the devices that they provided in Chrome at that time, and we were very dependent on their device management platform, which was a really great way for us to get going. Because
Sure.
we knew based on having done IoT at scale that we needed to have reliable
Right.
devices. We needed to have reliable device management, and that the application initially to do content management and have a really great cloud-based CMS and a reliable device that would drive the display and good control of that. We relied heavily on Google's capabilities as we got our start.
Excellent, excellent. I appreciate the background, and I'm sure that's you've hit on a couple of topics I want to come back to, but I love the title when we talk about data-driven digital signage. So one of the things that has occurred on this series before, and it seems to come up in every episode, is the concept of data-driven. And I think you and I both understand, and some of our audience will understand, this is a common trend in signage today. But since it is this constant recurring topic with my guests, whether we plan it or otherwise, this is Screens Unscripted. So this is actually unscripted, folks, even though we're going to have some natural segues in here. This is unscripted. What I wanted to do is kind of start with, since we got a lot of heavy topics that were brought up just by our title alone, I want to dig into that data-driven concept, because I think that drives a lot of systems design principles, CMS selection, planning. In your opinion, how critical is planning your data integrations for a potential digital signage system if we're going to accept the concept that data-driven is key? How would you advise going about that?
Yeah, well, I think a big challenge on whatever the purpose of your network is to make sure that you have relevant content. We've really put a lot of focus on for enterprise customers wanting to show the latest information that's available on their screens, and that doesn't always mean people are logging into a CMS and diligently changing the content every day. That works for a while, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then it falls up, like, oh, it got put down. I'm not keeping the content fresh, and and a lot of times it's not just kind of optional communication or nice to have communication. Like the stuff we're putting on screens these days, especially as we work in these larger networks, is really critical information to drive the business. So if we look at a manufacturing setting, for example, that data is probably going to be dashboards that are providing information to the deskless worker about what's going on right now in the factory, how are we doing, what machines are having issues or problems. And so it's critical information for running their manufacturing facility. If you look into more of a corporate setting, you're going to be looking at the dashboards that provide information about what's going on to drive the business that day. And so that might be in a call center. So where's that data come from? It comes from the call center management system. And so oftentimes we find, just using those couple examples, that we're basically trying to figure out what's the most relevant information and how do we get to it and how do we show it on the screen. And so dashboards, what we call dashboard connections, have been a big part of that. And the challenge there is, the good side is it's already there. It's, you can go into the SaaS application and there are views that are exactly what you want to put up on the screen. The challenge is, how do you have a device that can connect to that can authenticate to that can securely access that very key enterprise data, secure enterprise data, and how can we show it on the screen, and how can we also tailor that view so that we're not showing the things that were designed to be more of a screen that you might look at on your laptop. So it's got navigation improvements, right? So we're trying to, the most efficient way we can, repurpose the content that already is there and show that on the screen. Another example besides dashboard connections is where the data is already in the enterprise systems. So maybe it's not a dashboard, not in a SaaS dashboard, but it's in an enterprise system. There's already existing applications. We've encountered, manufacturers, for example, that have all these great web-based dashboards or views that they've built, and they either want to show them just as they are, or they want to show them in a little bit different way. But it's basically accessing that information that's already there. So it's often not the idea to have everyone upload the data into our CMS so that then we can display it. The data is already there in the enterprise. How do we connect to that more directly?
Yeah, you're pulling from different data sources. Maybe it's like we're talking about manufacturing, it's the ERP system, or maybe we're not feeding out into like a Power BI dashboard and just showing that like a web browser, but we want to get to that core data, or maybe inventory out of AS400 or whatever. You're trying to get at those root data sources. So it sounds like you really need to consider what our message is. Well, it's true of any digital signage system, right? It's about what our message is to our audience, because that's what we're trying to do. Right. So we're thinking about what our communication path is, and then what those data sources are. And I love the point, you caught that really well, and we get this pointed out frequently. You got to do dynamic data these days, because people aren't going to sit and just do, like, I made the joke JPEG du jour, but it's true. It's not, I'm not building a new piece of content or filling out a new form. It's, can I connect directly to a data source, pull that dynamically in, and then your job is not only to facilitate that connection as the CMS, but to also help with theming and skinning so it looks correct, and then making sure that gets delivered to the right spot. And it's really interesting because you hit a couple of different verticals there. We mentioned manufacturing, we talked about corporate, but we also use the term enterprise user. So I'm going to ask for a definition only so that we can make sure that our audience is understanding the perspective we're using that term from. So how are you defining enterprise user? Because I know some people use that as a vertical, like we would maybe talk about corporate communications. They're thinking about enterprise that way. Are you really thinking about more of a class of customer, like quantity of screens, or how are you really defining enterprise in this regard?
Yeah, I would define enterprise as the general kind of size of the organization, but sometimes more of the size of the network, the way we would view it. How many screens, how many people are involved with this network, and often enterprise takes you right into the whole security, like what's the security of this solution. So. Security is a big topic, and you tend to find it when you get to any organization of size, and so that's how I think about enterprise.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, and I definitely want to talk with you about security because that's something that's near and dear to my heart as well. I spend too much of my time filling out security questionnaires about CMS products, so I'm with you on that. I
Mhm.
do want to hit on something. So it looks like you're really making a pretty clear case for the use of dynamic data does help drive ROI for an enterprise user. So you would say that really is key here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the efficient operation of the business really is a lot of
Okay.
the use cases that we're dealing with, right? So it's like, how do we run our business well? We have to have information available to everybody that needs it. We need to have communication. We need to keep everybody on the same page. So that can be just very traditional digital signage, but more often than not, it's like connecting into systems and showing the information that's there to keep people
Right.
informed, up to date, so they can make the right decisions as they do their work.
Yeah, we got a lot of discussion over the last couple of episodes where we were talking about things like in a corporate environment, looking at all kinds of different statistics. Easy for me to English. I swear I can speak, I promise, folks. Looking at different statistics where we were looking at things like utilization of spaces and all the different tools, even things like air quality, environmental quality, can all be aggregated to create a more efficient set of tools through signage for the customer, for the end user in this case. So that's great. Um, since there's a whole bunch of different things I can branch off of here, but I am going to do one because a lot of the repeat audience members are used to what I jokingly call buzzword bingo, and we've hit a few of them already. But I'm going to bring up the dreaded one. You know where I'm going
Mhm.
with this, I'm sure, which is of course AI. Everybody always likes to talk about it, but I think that is relevant if we're going to discuss being data driven because I know there are too many people who go AI and they think, you know, sci-fi concepts of AI. We're not talking to Hal and he's not flying the Starship to Jupiter. We're not plugging the nukes into Skykit. We're hopefully smarter than that. But it's the idea of we've got these tools, right, that can help manage data. So how do you see AI realistically impacting what we're talking about here, this trend of an adoption with data integration?
Yeah. Well, clearly, there's AI can be a very helpful tool in terms of getting to all the data that's there. You know, there's frankly in any organization, there's way too much data that's not being leveraged or used. And what we see, like if I just use how do you manage a large scale network as an example, we have so much logging data, so much information, and you know, before AI, you know, what you tend to do is kind of do these point in time analysis of a snapshot of the data. So, you know, you look at your total device network one day and you say, let's really dig in and look at this and let's look at that. But it's like a one-time effort that's hard to repeat. It's hard to, you know, build the, what you want to do is kind of be able to train a system to be able to go in and just give you that daily view of what's going on the network. And you know, the way
Yeah.
we view it is we
Like
we want
trends
to be.
and stuff, not just a snapshot of what is, not just a snapshot of, you know, a single thing that's happening, looking at a log. I mean, I've spent my time doing troubleshooting things where it's like I'm staring at logs with timestamps trying to figure out what's going on, and then you go to the next log for the next tool and the next log. But it's more we're trying to build almost like a not to use the term again, but almost like a dashboard, right, where you're using the model to look at the aggregate data, because that's what AI is really good at, right? Is taking and analyzing data and presenting it to us in coherent ways. Because it's
Mhm.
not truly intelligent, it's just good with numbers. So now we can use that AI to say, hey, here's what our different systems are doing, and here's what our different network status is about, and things like that, right? So it makes it really, really straightforward to analyze and then predict. So also, there was some discussion in previous sessions about AI where we were talking about like helping with scheduling of data, maybe, or even potentially generating of content based on
Mhm.
concepts from data. Does that still kind of make sense too?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot of kind of buy versus build decisions as we think about our product and about like how do we bring AI to our customers. So um, content generation is one where you know we're more apt to say there are other companies out there that are building content generation tooling. How do we best integrate to that and make that available within our CMS if that's what they want inside the CMS? And then there's other things like more in the line of what we talked about around network and network management, the stuff that we do that's core to running our network really efficiently, that we're working on the AI to that, so that we can not only have that daily view and dashboard and insights for ourselves, but we want our customers that are also taking a part in managing their network. And there's varying degrees depending on, you know, the sub network of Skykit about what they're doing every day in terms of their network, but we want to give them those insights so they can know and understand very easily what's happening, and that we don't have to do such a heavy lift in terms of providing the data and insights. So that's where we see it going on the network side of it. And and then, you know, I mean, for AI in general, I mean, there's just so much going on for ourselves, just improving our productivity around how we build our software and how we test our software. And yeah, it's a big topic, and trying to break it down and figure out how to bring that into your organization and throughout your organization and through your product it's a challenge right now, but it's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, since we've got big topics, we touched on another concept. You mentioned it already, is the concept of scalability. And I want to explore that a little bit more, because I definitely want to get your take on that one, since you do focus on enterprise customers. It seems really straightforward, at least to me, if we're going to deploy a small number of screens, like you mentioned, somewhere like 5 to 30,000, you know, we're talking about a larger numbers enterprise. But that 5 screen kind of smaller network, that seems pretty simple to deploy. But does that level of complexity really maintain as we scale up, or do things really change as we start to get larger? And then does that change across verticals too? Because we've got all kinds of different market verticals we could be addressing.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge topic. So I consider ourselves really fortunate in that early on in Skykit, we took on a customer that really challenged us. It was like in our second year in business, and they had a network that scaled from, they had an existing network and they were building a new network from scratch. They chose us, and that network scaled from 0 to 17,000 devices in roughly a year. And
that's aggressive.
Yeah, so that particular customer just really changed our trajectory in terms of how we viewed everything. So what we found really quickly and where we are today is like we have to manage and control the entire stack. When you're talking about that level of scale, that this platform has to be very integrated. So, you know, we were software people and learned that we were going to need to some extent become hardware people, because to be able to have a really integrated stack that was really reliable and where we had full control, we would need to kind of take on, we would need to know what hardware it's running on. So we quickly made a decision that we were not going to have an offering that just ran on any device. So we went down a path of scale, which means we're going to have a selection of devices that we build and support. And what that means is we identified, you know, the hardware that we wanted to use. We build the firmware for that. So when we get into the topic of security, this is where so much of the security lands, is in the actual device. So first of all, what software is running on that device? Who built this device? Like, who built the firmware build and put these 30 applications on for like general purpose computing? You know, so we got into the business of saying, okay, we want to take that firmware, that base firmware, and we want to remove everything that doesn't need to be there, and we want to put our applications on it, and we want to disable all the capabilities on that device that it has that we don't need to use. We want to make those all configurable. You can turn them on or turn them off as needed. And then, you know, we want to be able to have a user build, which means, we don't want debug builds that allow a developer or someone to plug in and misuse that device. So that's the first layer of our stack, is just the hardware that the whole solution runs on, and firmware level control gives us the ability to basically have our own device management solution that we completely manage and control. And our goal is to have the same control platform run across all these devices. So we have a bunch of media player devices that we support. We have a lineup that you can see on our website. We also integrate with some SoC type devices. So Sony might be a good example in this discussion, since they're the sponsor. So we have an integration with Sony, and it took us a while to get there, because when we first started to talk to Sony, it's like, look, we'd like to have an option to be able to offer SoC. We can offer our media players with Sony screens as well, but we'd like to have an SoC offering. For this to work, we can't really ask our customers or our support people or anybody else to use your device management solution. Sony's got a device management solution.
Right.
What we want to do is put our device management solution on that device. And we were able to figure out how to accomplish that, which was great. We now have, even on SoC devices like the Sony Pro Bravia, we have our device management system, and that was really key. And the other thing that's really key, like as we talk about scale, is that we could remotely provision that device, meaning that we could ship a Sony display from a distributor out to a reseller out to a customer site, and they could take the Sony product out of the box, and through a very straightforward process and configuration that was set up in advance, we could transform that device into a Skykit device that was going to run our control. It was going to put the app on the device, make it available only in kiosk mode, all the things that we do to make it a really secure solution. We could do that without asking an installer to run through a list of 30 steps that they could usually get right about 20% of the time.
That's fair.
Right. So it's very complex, actually. It's very hard to do when you're going through and manually configuring a device for all the things that we want to be able to do. So, so we are able to basically get to a point now where we can put our entire platform on another device other than the ones that we build firmware for, and that was a really exciting step.
I bet.
So beyond the so just kind of talking about our stack, then we have the device layer, then we have device management, which I've talked about, and really where that's important is that we want to be able to basically do anything remotely. So even down to this device, we don't know what's going on with it. We're having issues, problems with it. We're going to factory reset device, and we're going to just rebuild it from our profile or our configuration, much like what I described we do on a new install. So like to be able to do that and not have to send a tech out is pretty incredible. And it's taken us a while to get to what we have today, but we're able to basically do just about anything remotely now through our device management solution. So that's kind of the next layer on the stack.
That's really important, because anytime you can eliminate a truck roll or you can improve installation efficiency, you're reducing cost, and that's what anybody wants at every level now. So that makes a ton of sense, but also goes to reliability. But you touched on another key topic, and that becomes a segue to an important topic I wanted to discuss, which is security. Because you described setting up, and because you own the technology stack with that, you've worked with the media player, you've got either your firmware or you've connected to the firmware like the Sony product. Now you've got the ability to really lock that product down, because nothing is more fun than I walk into a space and I see a screen either sitting on the Android home screen or worse yet, a Windows desktop, and now that screen's not generating any ROI for its user, or worse yet, once the OS is compromised because I've gained access, now I've got a path of attack into the user's network. So
Right.
I want to kind of dig into the idea of security because I
Sure.
think that's an important topic to explore. And that is super important. So every IT department's super focused on this concept. We all see it, we all know it, whether it's at your company or my company. Well, I'm the IT guy for my company, so our security is probably not so great. Oops. I'll apologize to my staff in advance for that, but hey, it's just as important as like reliability and uptime because I think they're all linked. So one of the things I wanted to kind of explore a little bit more is how security can the concept of network security kind of has to impact our planning. You touched on some of it with the device management, but how that impacts our planning, but also what we need to consider about how us as signage impacts the concept of network security. Because we're dealing with a ton of data, we're dealing with a bunch of different points of ingress and egress into a network. This isn't as simple as just punching a hole in a firewall, right? So how would you approach planning security around a signage system, and how do you address that?
Right. I think you need to look at it with all levels of what I'm calling the platform or the stack, which and we just talked about it, but like the security of the device is where you start, because you have a device sitting out in the world, and that's the most exposed access that anyone would have, right? How do I just tap into this device
Right.
and gain access to the information that is stored on it, or gain access to the networks that it's allowed to access? So a lot of the focus around security is with the device. So I won't repeat all of that, but just to know, like, that's just such an
Yeah.
important part of it. And then the other thing is that when you're operating at a firmware level, there's a lot of things you can do around making sure that that device stays secure. So just using device management as an example, normally we're setting up a device to run in a kiosk mode, which means it's at a hardware firmware level. It cannot be taken out of running this particular application. So there's a lot of kiosk modes that really run more at the application level. Like, it's pretty hard to figure out how to break it, but there are probably ways to break it if it's an application level kiosk mode. So when it's in a OS level kiosk mode, it's very hard to break into it. And then we take more other measures beyond that, which is we allow, like, if let's say a technician or someone working on a device wants to go break out of the kiosk mode that we have, there's a way to do it, like to get to native Android settings, let's say. What we do is make sure that once there's inactivity for just not very long, we basically just automatically put it back in kiosk mode.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things we do on the device to just watch and make sure, like, this device shouldn't really be operating very long outside of kiosk mode. It's a really rare thing. So when that does happen, we try to make sure we know what's going on. Like, why is this out of kiosk mode? That's not normal. And that's a good clue that something might be going on that is concerning. So then, then beyond that, it's like up to the application layer, whether that's our player app that's running in conjunction with our CMS, or that could be a native Android app. And so sometimes we're dealing with our app, sometimes we're dealing with a customer's native Android app. So there it's just around the security of the application, really just understanding that. What we do with our application that works in conjunction with our CMS is that we pen test that with third party. So we on a regular basis, we basically hire someone to give them all our stuff, and we ask them, go figure out what the vulnerabilities are, go figure out what we could do to improve our stack. And that pen test really is everything from hardware to device management to application. So the whole stack, we just say, go at it, find the most vulnerable things that you can find on our device so that we can then work to lower any of the risks that we might have on that device in terms of security.
Gotcha. And then there's also going to be all the actual network side considerations, right? Not just, so we've now got a very secure player, but that player's got to communicate through the customer's network out to the internet to get back to your cloud host, right? So we also have all of the network security factors, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we tell our customers what needs to be available for our solution to work. And so we encourage our customers to lock these devices down as much as they can. Usually they're put on their own subnet, and
Okay.
then they know that because we have a lineup of devices that run very much the same way. We're not, we're not just throwing our software on any device. That we can tell them pretty much exactly what they need to open on the network for us to be able to function properly. And we, with our biggest customers, we've made some pretty significant improvements to all of that, mainly driven by them, secure, real network experts that are telling us, this would be just a little bit better if we could do this or we could do that. And so, we've taken the lead from some of those enterprise experts and just continued to make our offering more secure that way.
Okay, excellent. Now, this is going to sound like I'm giving you an opportunity to plug Skykit, and I kind of am, but I'm going to ask the question. So we're talking about security, and the question comes up a lot. Does security influence the choice in media players? And I think you would say yes. And I know most organizations want to avoid Windows-based solutions these days, but I'm going to throw it at you. I mean, does security have an influence in choice of media player, and thus kind of influences choice of CMS too, right?
Yeah, I mean, arguably it's the most important factor. I mean, you could take a device running on Linux, Windows, Chrome, Android, any of those can run a digital signage solution.
Right.
But the first question is like, if you give me my choice, I'm going to ask first about the security of the device, not what is the device, right? Because any of those can be very secure media players. I wouldn't ask, is it Windows or Android? I'd start to ask questions about like, what is this device? Is it purpose built for what it's doing? What is the security of it? How do that's where I would start that whole conversation. Secondarily, it's like, oh, by the way, what OS is it running, and how is the OS maintained, and all of that. So that's something we haven't touched on too much either. But like, just with any of these devices, they need to be remotely updatable, down to the firmware level, and that's a big part of it too. And that can be done on any platform, but it's not often done. I mean,
no, that's true. That's true. And of course, Microsoft's never messed up a Windows update in brick devices out in the field, which is why they, you always want to trust things like that. I'm going to start getting hate mail from Microsoft for that one, but I said it.
You're asking for it.
It's okay. I'm a Windows guy, so I'm not, I'm not a Mac guy. I'm cool. They get their share of money from me, but no, it's a legitimate point, and I like the way you're approaching it. What is the device and what it was designed for? Because even within Android, if I'm talking about a consumer inexpensive streaming stick that has a questionable implementation of Android's consumer level hardware, you have no idea what it's doing, or even a consumer high quality product like an NVIDIA Shield or something, that's a different caliber of device than the ones that you sell, or from some of the OEMs in the space that manufacture commercial grade proper signage Android devices. So even if we get away from the questions of Windows, even looking at that, or even Chrome OS devices, a consumer-oriented Chrome box or Chrome bit is different than a commercial one, and that starts to shape then the whole discussion. That's a really interesting way to approach it, because then you look at, okay, then how do I make that OS as secure as possible? Although Windows can be more challenging than some of the others just because of prevalence of malware and security compromises and other things. And then also the OS level access. What are you doing with the system? Right. What do you allow? Like if you lock your firmware down really heavily, I can't get into it unless I know the secret handshake. That makes it easier. But we're putting these things, and I love the fact you called it out, we're putting these things out in public where they are the most vulnerable, because when I teach network security, I occasionally do classes on it at the entry level. I'm not an expert, gang. I promise. I got to make sure our audience knows I'm not trying to claim I'm an expert on it. But I always tell about access. It's like cracking a safe. Access is opportunity. And if I've got a long period of access, the chances of me getting into that network are higher. Just like if I'm sitting and I physically have access to a safe, the chances of me breaking into it are better.
Exactly.
So one thing I want to say before we get to Q&A, any trends or predictions? You've obviously got some vast experience in this space. Any trends or predictions, or polish up the old crystal ball? What would you share with our audience? What's coming down? Is there anything disruptive that you see? Any new technologies to watch? New product features that you think are going to be really meaningful? What do you see coming in the next couple of years that we need to keep an eye on?
Well, what I think is going to happen, for one, is that we talked about it a little bit earlier, but you're going to see a lot more of what we call digital signage today, really not necessarily involving a CMS UI. So I just got a number on this less than a week ago. For our Skykit network right now, 68% of our devices are basically running with integrations that do not involve our front-end UI, or
Okay.
front-end CMS. So I was actually a little bit surprised we were at that point already,
Wow.
but
Yeah, that's a big number.
yeah, so that means that 60% of the devices are not reaching into our kind of content management system associated with our CMS product. Many of them are using our content system, but we're going to another source to get the data. We're going to a customer system, and so I think we're probably ahead on that trend. But I think that's going to be a big trend that we see, is that there's just less people working in CMS interfaces, just more integrations going on. And of course, that's going to happen as the size of the organization, the complexity of the organization, the systems that are involved. That's going to happen more and more at the higher end of enterprise. But see that as a big trend. I also see a trend in more movement toward full stack solutions, like I'm describing. I mean, I just think that we talked a ton about security and like how do you get there? Well, and how do you get to scale? Well, you get through it by having as few permutations of all the components as possible, right? Like the more different types of devices and the more OSs, the more device management solutions. Not only does it make scale really difficult from a support standpoint, but just the whole security of it just makes it a lot more difficult. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. We talked about AI. Obviously, that's a huge trend that's going to impact all of us in terms of where we're heading with our product. I think just really important to figure out where the areas of focus should be when it comes to AI, and be careful to not chase the shiny objects. Figuring out where it's really going to have a benefit to customers, not just a cool.
Don't shoehorn AI into everything for the sake of it being AI, right?
Exactly, and that's something that we're working through right now. We're just working through really like how do we use this at all levels. So I don't know. Those are three of the the big trends that I see happening in our space.
Excellent. So normally before we do Q&A, I always like to say if we could leave our audience with 2 to 3 key takeaways, what would they be? You gave us a couple of good ones. Are there any other key takeaways you want to make sure we leave our audience with before we go to Q&A for everyone?
Let's see. We talked. It's kind of funny because my takeaways I had thought about were like definitely security and definitely integration of the platform, and staying informed about AI and just really trying to follow where that's all going. I mean, those really are the ones that I kind of had in mind as I thought about like what are the most important points out of our conversation today.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. So we're going to go to our audience questions. We've got a few here that have been coming in. For all of you out there in the audience, again, please feel free to use the Q&A in the GoToWebinar toolbar. It should be again on the right-hand side of your screen unless you moved it. Go ahead and throw any questions you've got. I've got a couple in here, and we are going to start with, let me actually get to where I can read it, might be helpful, huh? All right. Different from remote workers, do you see that there's now a large number of highly skilled workers that are on site in a factory or other high-tech environment, but they don't use a typical desk or laptop computer at all in their daily routines? If yes, How does this play into scaling messaging systems? Oh, that's a good one. I think we
Yeah,
touched on this earlier.
yeah. I think a lot of times when people talk about deskless workers, they assume they're not using technology or something. Like they don't know how to do that. They're just on the manufacturing floor doing their thing. But if you actually go onto a modern manufacturing floor, there's an incredible amount of technology.
Yeah,
The workers aren't necessarily using a laptop, but there are displays and there are terminals and there are specialized devices everywhere. And I think just to go along with all that technology that's about running the device or indicating when something's not working, or like safety systems and all of that you see, you just see a lot of displays that are just showing information.
yeah.
So I would say the typical desk worker today is using a lot of technology when they're working. They're just not like us, where we're spending most of our day
Yeah,
in front of a laptop, or a laptop connected to a screen, doing everything we do. They're using a lot of different technologies, and I think the display solutions about just showing information on panels, as well as kiosk applications that are being used to, input information into about what's going on very quickly and efficiently in that environment where they're, not sitting down at a desk necessarily.
right, right. We got another one. This is a good one, but you actually answered it for our asker. They asked it early on in the session. How do you address device management under Android? You covered that one, so that's part of your secret sauce. So
Yeah,
go check out
one thing I
Skykit.
didn't really mention is that, like, when we started to get on this Android path, it was, boy, we got a lot more pushback around the use of Android than we do now. I mean,
Yeah, I bet.
we're able to describe the way we modify Android to make it a very secure system, but I do think there's been a shift, like in Android specifically, where we don't get the kind of pushback we used to get around Android. I think
Right.
it's just using a lot more in the enterprise. I think maybe people understand that it can be a very secure operating system, and you just have to make it an enterprise, an enterprise stack if you're using Android.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got another interesting one here. Network security is a huge challenge going forward. Yes. But the actual question, will AI tools radically improve the ability of network managers to lock down their systems? And is there a digital signage aspect to that from a system architecture perspective? Ooh, oh, that's a good one. Now I want to hear the answer to that one.
All right, well, I'll give you my best answer. So what I like to do is rely on my cloud provider to really help me with the security of our network. So when you work with a provider like Google or Amazon, there's an incredible amount of security going on at the network level, in terms of them. There's things going on that we don't really even know or understand that they're doing to kind of help secure our environment, and so that's a big part of it. The other is just the security on the device itself, and I mean, we've talked a lot about that, I think, in
Right.
this session about, but yeah, I think for us, we feel really good about following the latest in terms of what our providers like Google Cloud are doing in the realm of security, and how we can leverage what they're offering us on the platform in terms of being able to monitor and understand what's going on and respond to threats. Um, so
Gotcha.
that'd be my answer, other than just keeping up generally with security and going through all the normal practices of having others kind of poke at what you're doing. Our SOC 2 compliance audit on an annual basis, always our tabletop exercises that are part of complying with SOC 2. Those are all things that are really important, I think, just to doing your very best around the security of your product.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, I know we're right at time. I want to be respectful of your schedule here. First of all, Paul, if anybody wants to learn more about your team and what you all do, you get an opportunity to give a shout out. Where can they go to learn more about Skykit?
Sure. Well, you can go to our website, skykit.com. we have a newsletter there if you want to sign up for that and just kind of follow what we're doing and see our blog articles and that sort of thing. You can follow Skykit on LinkedIn as well, and if you want to reach out directly, I'd love to, talk or follow up on this conversation. You can find me on LinkedIn. Paul Lundberg, I think I'm the only kind of Paul Lundberg tech guy out there, so I don't think you'll have a problem finding me.
Excellent. All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank again our sponsor, Sony, for helping us put this series on. We couldn't do it without you all. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your expertise with us. I really appreciate the conversation and your participation and support. So thank you for being here today. And of course, I'd be terribly remiss if I didn't thank everyone out in the audience. We have completed season 1. We're going to take a brief break. We're going to do some planning, and then we're going to come back for season 2. So please stay tuned. So again, Paul, thank you. Sony, thank you. Audience, thank you. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and we'll see you back soon on another episode of Screens Unscripted.
All right.